It's like I don't care about nothing, man. Yeah. Oh,
What's going on, guys? Today we start triangle proofs, what you've all been waiting for. Now, what we're going to go over today is just side, side, side. So by the end of this, you should know how to fill in a proof for side, 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 and what you can assume if you see it in a proof. Alright, so we are starting with triangle proofs. On the top of it, it's asking you what are you allowed to assume. Now, the things you're allowed to assume are vertical angles and reflexive sides. So if you see vertical angles, you can assume it. So since we're dealing with triangles, vertical angles are normally almost like X marks a spot. So like here and here would be vertical. So if it's in a triangle, I'm just connecting these lines out here. Ooh, ah. And reflexive sides, reflexive is something we talked about before. That's when you say the same thing equals itself. So a way we can have that happen is if I had a triangle, let's say there was a line down the middle. Now I have two triangles and they both share this side. So they would both have the same side between the two triangles. So we are going to be going over side, side, side in this video. So that's when you have three pairs of congruent sides. So for example, if I were to do the markings, this side would go with this side. Those ones are the ones congruent, so I put one dash through both. Now if I talk about a different side, say this one, I'm going to put two dashes because the ones that have two dashes go together, the ones that have one dash go together. So you might be able to figure out this one would have three dashes. So depending on how many dashes there are, those are the ones that go with each other. So reasons sides are congruent. I won't go over the angles quite yet, but since we are doing side, 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 we're going to need to know some things about the sides. So reasons sides are congruent. One can be it's given to you. So every proof always starts with a given. So if they tell you something is congruent, then you know that. Now another one is if you see the word midpoint, one of your reasons has to be the definition of midpoint. I have it already underlined, but I find it so important that I'm even highlighting it. So you might want to star, circle, highlight, whatever you have to know it's important.
Focus. Focus.
And then the other way is reflexive property. That's where one of the things that we could assume up top, where if they share a side, it would be reflexive, so it would have to be the same length as well. Alright, so now we look at page 2. Page 2 says you're on the very top. You notice I already filled it in. Same thing that was on the page before. So just about all the pages, if not all of them, start off by saying this. So I wonder if I think it's important. Now you're allowed to assume vertical angles and reflexive side when the picture shows it. But what we're going to be putting in here is side, 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 which sides would go together and why. So I'm going to look at the ones that have one dash. So AB would be congruent to DE. And I knew that because they both have one dash. So then BC would be congruent to EF. And AC would be congruent to DF. So we knew this by the markings in this picture. So what we're going to write down here is a congruency statement. So one triangle is congruent to the other. So if I said triangle ABC, it does matter what letters I do on the next one. So if I said A, B, C, I would have to do triangle D, E, F for the other one. And the reason that these triangles are congruent is by side, side, side. Okay, so now we are going to do our first triangle proof. Everybody always remembers their first.
That's what she said.
Triangle proof. Now, this one, every single proof starts with a given. So, I don't even need to read this, and I know my first reason over here is given. But now I am going to go ahead and read it because obviously it's important to read the proof you're doing. So it says that PQ is congruent to ST. This was the first thing given. Now every time you do one of these proofs, I'm expecting you to draw in the picture if you have it. So PQ and ST are supposed to be congruent. So I put one dash through those sides. The next thing given to us was QR is congruent to RT. So this was also given to us. So QR and RT are supposed to be congruent. Now it says that R is the midpoint of PS, so R is in the middle of PS. So this was another thing given to us. Now, on the page before, we said that if we ever see the word midpoint, so I'm even going to highlight this to show that I think that this is important, because this should turn into almost a gimme question. So if you notice, the next statement says PR and SR are congruent. So this side and this side are congruent. The reason we know this is because it said midpoint earlier. So anytime it says midpoint, we're going to have an answer of definition of midpoint in the reason side. So I'll highlight this too to let you know that whenever we saw midpoint, I knew one of my answers has to be definition of midpoint. So you'll notice in the marking that we have this side and this side are congruent, this side and this side are congruent, and this side and this side are congruent. So we have three pairs of congruent sides. So triangle PQR is congruent to triangle STR. This is what we're trying to prove. This is going to be because of side, side, side. And you don't actually have to write out side, side, side. You can write out just S, 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 or otherwise known as S.
Right.
Okay, so that is the end of the video. Now you should know how that you can assume vertical angles and reflexive sides when you see it. And hopefully you remember things like the beginning of every proof starts with given. The last statement in every proof is what you're trying to prove. So things like that can make the proofs seem a little less intimidating, and I hope you enjoyed. Now keep in mind, for practice, page 3 is 2 more proofs for side, side, side. I suggest trying them.